Good morning and welcome everybody. Today's Wednesday, April 10th, 2019. My name is Jeremy and this is my first cup of coffee. And I can already tell that something is going on with the bandwidth, that it's slow as God. That's unfortunate because if I'm seeing it here, it's going to be even worse for you guys. Hopefully the audio is not terrible. But I'm just going to work with it because what am I going to do? I can go reboot things right now, but by the time I do that, things would be over off. So, all right. So Wednesday, hump day. It snowed here yesterday, which was crazy. Oh, Stacy says the audio is working fine. Good, thank you. It snowed here a bunch yesterday, which was really silly because it's April and most of it's gone. That snow, well, from yesterday anyway. There's still plenty. My backyard has a bunch, more than a bunch. So, what else? What else can I tell you about? Got a bunch done yesterday. Worked on some stuff for the team. Yeah, we've got this interesting thing going on. It's been a little while since I talked about it, but just talking about the frustrations that I've had with some of our products, getting enough of them, getting them available for people. Yeah, every day I'm getting, I don't know if I want to call it hate mail, because it's not hate, it's frustration mail from customers or people who want to be customers saying, hey, I want to buy this. When can I buy this? And they're sad. So I'm trying, doing the best I can, hoping we get this resolved soon. But you learn a lot through mistakes and problems and frustrations, and I've learned a lot. So I thought today we would talk about forms. Now, whether you call them kata or poomse or forms or toll or hyung or patterns, I think those are all the names I know. There might be other names. Those are the ones I know. They're pretty powerful, and in the modern martial arts landscape, they're rather controversial because most schools do them. Some schools are very passionate about doing them and talk about why. Some schools do not do them, and those schools are incredibly loud about why they do not. And the two loud groups argue about it. Now, when I was growing up, there wasn't a question. Everybody did forms. And even today, I think every school I've ever trained at does forms. Some have more than others. Some put more of an emphasis on them than others. But I think forms are important. Now, I've said this before, and I'm sure I'll say it again. So in karate, there's an order that is often laid out. It's a progression, I guess that's the best way to put it. Kihon, kata, kumite. Kihon is basics, your fundamental movements. There are even some very small kind of mini forms in some karate styles. I had some in my first style growing up that we called kihon. What's the name for that? What's the Korean name for them? Kiban. Duh. One letter different. So those exist too, and there's a difference there. There's a difference between your basics and your kiban or kihon or your kind of mini patterns. There's no spirit in there. There's no life to that. Nobody's gonna do that and have someone else watch and say, wow, that was powerful. They're not that complex. They're not that in-depth. But they train you to get better, to learn movements, and you become better at martial arts. And then oftentimes, well, generally you're going to learn forms and how to spar somewhere after that. Different schools do it differently. But here's why I say forms are after sparring in the progression. Doesn't mean that you learn one before the other necessarily. But I think that forms are the crown, the goal in martial arts. Because I can show you plenty of people who can do great basics. They're terrible at forms, they're horrible at fighting. I can show you people who are good fighters. Their fundamentals are sound. Their forms are terrible. I've known quite a few. You might be one of them. But I've never known someone who was great at forms, who was not at least good at sparring. And I'm sure there's somebody out there, but that's probably because they have very little experience with their sparring. Now here's why I say this. In order to do forms really well, what do you have to do? You have to know the movement. You have to dedicate time. You have to know the basics, the fundamentals. You have to be able to put them together. But you also have to bring some of yourself forward. You have to put some passion into it. And anyone who's, excuse me, coffee's making me burp. Anyone who's spent a lot of time training, especially in forms, knows that in order to tap into that part of yourself, it's difficult. And it requires some introspection. I've admitted at times that when I do a form in competition, it generally takes me 30 minutes or more to recover. And I don't mean physically so much, I mean emotionally, mentally. I put everything I have into it. I put everything I have into it in a way that I can't when I spar with people I'm friends with, because it's not life or death. But I can simulate that life or death in my mind. And the better I get at it, the more real it becomes to me. Is there truly someone trying to kill me? No, absolutely not. And I'm not saying that forms training is a replacement for self-defense training. But I am saying that you get to a point where your forms training helps you in absolutely everything else. When you understand the application of your forms and you practice them, that gives you insight into what self-defense can be. When you understand your forms, that gives you ideas and sometimes a way to present yourself when you're sparring. And when your forms get better and you go back and do your basics, it can give you an idea of how you might use those basics. A bit of foreshadowing. Well, I'm going to practice this movement with this intent because I use it here. Or I'm going to think about this movement in this way. Or I'm going to practice this aspect of this movement because I struggle with it here. There's a lot that you can do there. If I take a basic movement that I'm struggling with, I'm not going to work on that in my sparring. It's not going to get better because of my forms, probably. And the majority of what we do in our sparring, let's face it, even in traditional martial arts, doesn't show up in our traditional martial arts. It doesn't show up in our basics. It doesn't show up in our forms. Silly people sending me messages. So the next time you're doing your forms, think about why. Think about being a warrior on the battlefield. Think about all the other things that you get out of it. You could take 2 minutes and practice a form. Stacy, I'm gonna, oh, hold on. Where'd my comments go? Stacy, I'm gonna respond to that in a moment. I could take a couple minutes and do a form. Come on. Where'd it go? There they go. There's a way to turn comments on and off so I can see them. To spend 2 minutes on one form, put all your heart into it. Most people are going to get more out of that once they've reached probably at least intermediate ranks than they will out of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe more of any other training. I've seen it, I've watched it, I've lived it myself. So don't underestimate forms, they're important. So Stacy's comment, sparring still my weakness. It evokes too much fear of being hurt or losing control, self-judgment on weight. I'm my biggest enemy in sparring. Most of us are our biggest enemy in martial arts in general. That's why I define martial arts as personal development. We've got to get past our own crap. And it gives us the opportunity to do so. Oh, and you know the other cool thing about doing forms? You don't need somebody else to work on them. You don't even need a lot of space. In fact, when I was growing up, I was told that you should be able to do any of your forms in a 4-foot square. That's some very shallow stances, but you can do it. All right. I love comments. I love questions. I love answering them. So don't be afraid. Leave a question or a comment below. Give me something to respond to. I'll talk about it tomorrow because I do the show 5 days a week, every weekday morning, 6:30 a.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube. And of course, you can catch the audio feed later in your podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else you can find podcasts. And if you want the easiest way to find the latest episodes, firstcupwithjeremy.com. Find the video from today there. All right. I hope you have a wonderful day. Go practice your forms. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Take care.